How does a deal for just one single dollar end up costing nearly $300 million? It sounds completely impossible, right? But it's the absolutely true story of how a major telecom company in Ghana just collapsed. So let's dive into this wild financial saga.
This is the number right at the heart of our story, $289 million. That is the mind-blowing amount of debt that the company, now known as Ghana, found itself completely buried under, and it triggered a crisis that sent shockwaves through the entire industry.
So the billion-dollar question, or I guess the $289 million question, is how did we get here? From what looked like a really promising merger to cell towers literally having their power shut off and millions of customers being shipped over to another network. We're going to unpack exactly how this whole thing fell apart. All right, let's start with the immediate crisis. We're talking about the events that pushed this company right to the very edge, setting off all kinds of alarm bells across the country. And this is where the problems get brutally real. I mean, we're not just talking about figures on a page anymore. Power was literally being cut to cell sites because of massive unpaid bills, $124 million owed to just one tower company. It got so bad the government had to step in and move 3 million subscribers to a competitor, just to keep their phones working. The company was, and still is, on life support. To really understand why this all failed, we've got to go back in time. Before all the chaos, there were two separate major companies competing in a super tough market. Each had its own identity, but they shared a common and, as it turns out, fatal flaw.
On one side, you had Airtel. It's this Indian giant that came into Ghana back in 2010 with some really aggressive marketing. And on the other side, you had Tigo, a pioneer in the market since '92, known for its cool, youth-focused brand. But here's the thing. They both had the exact same huge problem. They were both just bleeding cash. They simply couldn't compete effectively.
And this chart right here, this shows you why. The market back then was dominated by the 800-pound gorilla, MTN Ghana, which had over half the entire market. Airtel and Tigo were big, sure, but they were basically just fighting each other for the scraps. The bottom line is, staying separate meant they were just going to slowly bleed out. So, facing this reality, they decided to do something pretty drastic. Instead of fighting each other to the death, they would join forces in a massive merger. The hope was that together they could finally take on the big guy. So, in 2017, AirtelTigo was born. And on paper, it looked like a brilliant move. This new company would be the clear number 2 operator in the whole country. The logic was simple. Combine your networks, combine your customers, and use that new scale to get profitable and challenge the top dog.
And the scale was nothing to sneeze at. The new AirtelTigo launched with 10 million subscribers. So this wasn't just some new player. It was supposed to be a new powerhouse. There was a lot of fanfare and optimism, but it wouldn't last long.
So, what went wrong? This merger was supposed to be the answer, but instead, it just seemed to create a whole new set of problems. The foundation of this new company started to crack almost right away.
One of the biggest red flags has to be this revolving door at the CEO's office. The first CEO resigned right after the merger. Her successor quit less than a year later. The next one resigned the year after that. I mean, 4 CEOs in less than 4 years. You just can't build a stable, successful company with that kind of chaos at the top.
And then came the knockout blow. The two huge international parent companies that created this merger in the first place, they decided they'd had enough. In 2020, Airtel's parent company said it was pulling out. A year later, Tigo's parent, Millicom, did the same. The struggling venture was now basically an orphan. And this quote from Millicom's CEO really captures the cold, hard logic of big business. For these parent companies, the whole Ghana project had become a distraction. They had bigger fish to fry elsewhere. In Millicom's case, a complete pivot to Latin America. They were cutting their losses and moving on.
So, with the company abandoned by its creators and on the verge of total collapse, an unexpected new owner stepped in, the government of Ghana. And they did it with a deal that made everyone's head spin. $1. That was the official price tag. The government got 100% of the company, the network, the subscribers, everything for a single dollar. But here's the massive catch. They also acquired all of its liabilities, all of that massive, growing debt.
Now, the government's official line from the communications minister at the time was that this was a necessary rescue mission. It wasn't about making a profit. It was a strategic intervention to protect thousands of jobs and to stop a major disruption to the country's communication network.
But the criticism was immediate, and it was harsh. Opposition lawmakers were furious, arguing that the government had used taxpayer money to buy a failing company with no real transparency. As this quote shows, they saw it as a completely unacceptable burden on the people of Ghana.
If the government takeover was supposed to be the solution, well, it wasn't. The problems didn't just continue, they got worse, bringing the company, now rebranded as AT Ghana, to that crisis point we saw right at the beginning.
Which brings us to today, with the company in total shambles and everyone asking the exact same question. What on earth happens now?
Well, let's just look at the brutal reality. Far from challenging the market leader, AT Ghana has crumbled. Its market share has just plummeted to a tiny 7.5%. And meanwhile, MTN's dominance has only grown. They now control over 75% of the market. That original goal of the merger, it's now a distant, impossible dream.
And the government's view on this has soured dramatically. The new Minister of Communications did not mince words. He described inheriting a massive financial hole and called the people behind the original $1 deal enemies of the state. Wow, that is a stunning reversal from that initial strategic intervention story.
So the path forward is a total mess. A major audit is underway trying to figure out what to do. A Canadian investment firm claims its $150 million offer was just ignored. The jobs of 300 employees are at risk, and after all this time, the government still doesn't seem to have a clear rescue plan.
And this really brings us to the final, crucial question. This isn't just about one company's failure. It's about the health of an entire country's telecom sector. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Can any market truly be competitive? Can it serve its customers well when it has one dominant giant, one struggling competitor, and a third major player on permanent life support?